My name is John Waltz. I'm the CEO of Forward Edge, and thank you for coming. I know taking off in the middle of the summer is not easy or fun. We ran into a lot of vacations, but I mean, I understand wanting to sleep in. So anyway, thank you for coming. I know that they got some great things planned for you guys. One of my duties as CEO is try to spot, understand, see the trends that are shaping the market, that are shaping education, and to see how we're going to play in that. So we work really hard at Forward Edge to try to anticipate what's coming 2, 3, 5 years down the road and start gearing up for those changes. So, you know, a lot of our solutions, we were probably 3 years, 4 years ahead of the market. And it takes us time to understand the market, what it's doing, how to test things in beta, how to get solutions that work, find those manufacturers that are good at what they do, that support education. And we've done a pretty good job at that. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, we started seeing this trend of, you know, what is this integration piece? I mean, from my point of view, I've been doing this for a long time, and I always knew that there was a hardware piece, and we were constantly looking at the curriculum side, and vice versa, and we were kind of looking at each other like, well, here's all the hardware, here's the curriculum, how can we do this thing better? And for years and years and years, it was like the two people were like looking over the fence to see what the other person was doing. And you've seen over the last 3 years, I would say 4, you're starting to see the curriculum and the technology moving together and closer. And then I'd say about 2 years ago, it seems like it really started to then again separate where, you know, we've got this integration person almost as an intermediate between the curriculum and technology. So, and then we're seeing it now where just recently in some of the people that have moved from one district to another, you have a person that's in charge of the curriculum, a person that's in charge of the technology, then you have the whole integration spot that's opening. So we're seeing a whole another job being created for this. So ISTE, I've been to ISTE 5, 6, 7 years now, and it's always an amazing experience. So I'll let them go on to the trends, but thanks again for coming, spending your morning with us. Feel free to get as much food. We got plenty.
I think I got an opportunity to meet everyone that is here, if I didn't already know you. But I am Katie Seamer. I'm our Director of Curriculum and Technology Integration. Okay, I wanted to go through a couple of things. Here's our little agenda today. Obviously, please go back for seconds. We have tons of food. We're going to talk about a little conference overview and some of the major takeaways and kind of the themes that you guys can take back to your buildings and what we're seeing, these big trends that are coming down the pipeline and kind of the most important things that we saw at the conference. And then we'll hopefully have a little time to talk about how you can apply it in your district, talking about ISTE 18, so how you can attend next year. And then we are going to wrap up with some sandbox time. So a lot of the things that we're going to share with you, we have like a little sandbox table set up in the back, so you can actually kind of hands-on get to explore and play with it. This first slide, we have it kind of rotating on that TV. We'll wait that TV back up. But we have resources to share with you too. So I would say the main one, the most important one, is the Symbaloo web mix. So it actually has a link to pretty much everything that we're going to share with you as far as slides and everything. And then it also has a link to any site or tool that we are going to share with you that would support some of these trends. So if you want to go ahead and like take a picture of this or do something, or it'll be rotating again on that back TV. They woke it up for you, so you can check it out. Just to give you an idea, first of all, ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education. So they are really the premier professional organization for educational technology. The conference that they hold every year, there's really nothing out there that matches it. So this past year, there was 21,000 people that attended this conference in Texas from all 50 states in the U.S., from 72 countries around the world, and 8,000 different school districts were represented. So when you go to this conference, that's just to give you an idea of the type of perspective that we have when we're out there. So I think a lot of times we can get really stuck in this, what are other people in Cincinnati doing? What are other people in Ohio doing? And we forget that that's not really the market that has been created for our kids, that we need to prepare them for beyond what Cincinnati and Ohio is doing these days. So this conference really allows you to get that perspective and to bring that in. So themes and takeaways. The first thing I want to talk about are the brand new ISTE standards for educators that were released, and we actually have a copy for each of you. So if you didn't grab them, you can leave here with a copy. ISTE creates a set of standards for students. They changed the name from teachers to educators this year for administrators, for coaches, and for computer science teachers. And they develop these standards with feedback from students all the way through teachers, board members, policymakers, and research based all around the world. So these skills are truly looking at what do students need to know, what do teachers need to know to prepare these kids to be ready to enter into that next phase of life or enter into the job market. And again, not just what's these Ohio standards, but these are truly international standards. So for our kids to be able to compete globally, this is what they need to know. And just some of the major changes. The first one, and we kind of debated pulling out equity as a standalone theme, but then just kind of decided to lump it in with the standards because equity was introduced over and over at the conference, and the standards kind of shrink equity throughout. So when I say equity, I mean a lot more, not just making sure that every kid has access to a device, not just making sure that every kid has access to the internet at home, libraries, etc. But equity is really truly now that tons of schools are one-to-one or they have tons of carts and everybody's been increasing access to the internet. But now it's actually access in the classroom to how that technology is being used. So it's inequitable access. If I have a classroom full of students that has a teacher that never uses that technology or uses that technology in really ineffective, low-level drill and kill ways only, and then I have another teacher who's using the technology really effectively to give these kids access to tools and to things that they would never have access to if it weren't for that technology. That is creating the same inequitable access as if this other classroom didn't have access at all to that technology. So that was a big theme, and we see that throughout the standards as well. Empowered learners, that's also part of the student standards as well. So learners being students and being the educators themselves, that teachers need to constantly refresh their practice. There is a huge emphasis on teachers attending professional development both formally and informally to further their practice, and it's not okay for teachers to just say, I've been doing this 15 years and I don't need to attend that, or I don't need to learn something new anymore. Times are changing too quickly. A lot of emphasis on leadership, so leading to change and less of a focus on like the separation of digital citizenship and citizenship, but it's just a part of our world now. So again, it's not okay for educators to say, I don't want to like have anything to do or to know about social media and accessing and being a digital citizen, right? They don't need to be tweeting all day long, but they at least need to familiarize themselves with it because it's just a part of our world now. Collaborate early and often. There's a huge emphasis on collaboration for both educators and in the student standards. So teachers collaborating with not only other teachers in the building, with their administrators, with parents, but with educators beyond their building. So that's where kind of that social media digital citizenship comes in, getting them to collaborate both locally, nationally, internationally with other educators, and then also collaborating with students. There's a big emphasis on teachers collaborating with their students too. So less of that expert in the room and more of that guide on the side facilitator working through things with students to learn it. Designing for diversity. So again, we kind of come back to that theme of equity. So using technology and designing lessons that reach all of the diverse needs of all of the learners in the classrooms, because there's so many things, especially with Google free Chrome extensions that do really powerful things that you used to have to pay hundreds and thousands of dollars for in software to give kids access to some of this stuff. Again, with the facilitating, and instead of that expert sage on the stage, a big emphasis on using data to inform the practice, not define everything, but using all of these technology tools to give you some data and feedback. And then I just have the link up here if you want to get to the full standards, but we do have a printout for you here as well. ISTE kind of designed this image, and they say that these new educator standards will really stretch your practice. I think it's kind of corny, but here's the yoga pose. It's to stretch your practice as an educator. And just as a little FYI, we do a survey. It's a pretty comprehensive survey. It's like 80 questions. We got early access to the teacher standards this year, so it's ready to go. It's all aligned to ISTE's new educator standards. For those of you who are at that leadership level, you want to get an idea of where your teachers are. It's not things like I am using, Google Earth in my classroom every day. It's very much around the pedagogy and how they're teaching and aligned to ISTE standards to help give you a focus on where to plan that professional development and things like that. So if you're interested at all, talk to us about it after this. Send us an email and we'll chat more with you to give you more information about the survey. All right, Tyler.
Once again, it's really nice to have everybody here this morning. I'm Tyler Irwin. I work alongside Katie and Michael in the Curriculum and Integration Department. One of the big themes from ISTE was all about telling your story. And whether that was sort of by design or on accident, it seemed like all the keynotes, a bunch of the sessions, and many of the tools that were featured were all about this theme, tell your story. So we might ask the question, well, first of all, who cares? Why do we need to tell our story, both as teachers and as students? When you think about storytelling, one of the unique things about it is that it engages a lot of different parts of our brain. So not only when we're telling stories, our students are going to be more captivated, they're going to be more engaged, but more parts of their brain are going to be involved. It helps with memory, it helps with recall. And ultimately, one of the things that telling our story allows us to do is to defy that single narrative. The single narrative that our students have, whether they're coming from a bad socioeconomic background or a bad family life at home, or whatever issues and struggles they face, oftentimes they are defined by that narrative that someone else gives them. The same is true for us as teachers. Think about the narrative that you see on TV or in pop culture that defines sort of maybe the nonchalant, lazy, summer's off, that's the only reason why they teach teacher, right? Well, one of the things that we need to do, both as educators and for our students, is allow them to tell their story, to develop that voice, to develop our identity. And that was one of the themes of the conference that, like I said, was emphasized throughout. So when you think about stories, they connect us as people, they humanize us. So we might ask ourselves as educators, are we doing a good enough job of using social media to share our triumphs in the classroom? Are we making known all the great things we're doing? Are we sharing that with others? And then at the same time, are we sometimes sharing our failures? Because that's part of telling our story as well. It's humanizing ourselves and making it real to those around us. The same is true for our students. They have to be able to defy that single narrative by sharing their story as well, by sharing their triumphs, by sharing their hopes and dreams, and by sharing their failures too. So I really can't say it much better than the keynote speaker from Tuesday, Ginny McGeer, and here's just a sample. Sound.
Society tells our students who they can and cannot be. And as educators, it's our role to help amplify the untold story of limitless potential, to help our students believe that no matter what story you've been exposed to, you can be whoever you want, and you can write the story of being the first, if there isn't a story that came before you. And so I want us to think about the single story of teachers, and the single story that we see on television. We see ourselves parodied in late night shows. And I want us to think about the untold story of wizards, that teachers are fun-loving, adventure-going, exciting, passionate human beings who are leading our kids to go on an adventure every day.
All right. So that was just a small snippet of her keynote that was given on Tuesday morning. And one of the things that she really highlighted was the fact that as teachers, we have to do a good job of telling our story because we are wizards. We do great things. And we should encourage others to not only learn, but share with us in that effort. So we wanted to highlight a couple of tools that you can use really today, this upcoming school year. A bunch of great free tools that were highlighted at ISTE that will help not only you tell your story, but will help your kids tell their story as well. So if you don't know about some of them, I just want to highlight a few. The first one I'd like to highlight is EduBlogs. It's a totally free blogging platform for students. It gives you a lot of great sort of monitoring tools if you're a teacher and want to make sure that, obviously things are appropriate and things are controlled. But that's a great way for students to really develop their own voice, to blog, to journal, to share their thoughts and their dreams and their hopes. Flipgrid was one of the hottest tools of ISTE. It seemed like it was everywhere you went, Flipgrid, Flipgrid, Flipgrid. It's a great way for students to engage in the way that they engage on social media, through video, to speak to a camera, to share their thoughts, to ignite discussion, and certainly to collaborate better in the classroom. And then the last one I wanted to highlight was Adobe Spark. So it's a great way to create web stories, to make really visual images, and it's just another creative way that students can make content and once again tell their story. So this was one of the unofficial themes of ISTE, and we thought it was worth sharing with you that one of the important things we can do with educators is, of course, pay attention to the standards, pay attention to the requirements that we have as teachers, but also make sure we're sharing our story and the story of our students with others. And it's interesting because that perfectly segues into our next theme. And Katie sort of alluded to it earlier, but what about our students as digital citizens? How important that is in this age where really we can't be naive about it, right? Most of our students, they have 24/7 unfiltered access to the internet in their pocket, at home, whenever they want, at the tips of their fingers. So what are we doing to make sure that they're trained, that they're taught, that they're showed how to use that power responsibly, that power effectively? We have to think too about the data privacy and security, all of the things they're putting out there, the things that they're exposed to that they might be naive to, that they might not even know about. And then certainly the fact that technology does impact lives. Whether it's used for good or for bad, we know that technology causes many issues. Maybe in the classroom, maybe amongst the relationships of our students, maybe at home. So we have to then ask ourselves, what are we doing to make sure that our students are acting as digital citizens in this world that they have 24/7 access to? Now on the flip side of things, we know that the internet gives them an authentic audience. So what a great thing that is. Instead of just turning in assignments to us, the teacher, they can engage with real people. It motivates them to do better work. And we're really kind of getting to this point where a web presence is the new resume. No longer is it like the one-page resume, here you go, here are my qualifications, here's my job history. Rather, employers, they're looking to the web to see what this person has done. What sort of person are they like? What do they care about? What are they motivated by? So are we doing a good enough job of helping our students harness that power? And then lastly, if we do it right, this online world is going to help foster relationships that they can have for a lifetime. So we really have to ask ourselves, what are we doing in this regard? And if you think about it, we've experienced more change in the past 20 years than any 20-year period in history. All of the things that our students are exposed to, it seems like almost overnight. So when we think about that, we might reflect. One student said, social media is like water. You can either let us drown or teach us to swim. And this is a tough conversation in schools. How do you balance unblocking certain social media sites on the domain, yet making sure that it's controlled, making sure that your students are safe? Tough conversations to have, but you can see the worthwhile value in really teaching your students how to use social media with responsibility. And then we might ask ourselves, are we doing this? Are we helping our students use these tools responsibly? Are we helping them swim, or are we letting them drown? And Katie said this earlier, but certainly we used to view these things as sort of a separate world. Oh, it's digital safety, it's digital awareness, it's digital leadership. But you see, in today's day and age, this is what it is. Teaching them to act as digital citizens, that's for their safety. It's for their awareness. That's to develop leadership. So if we're not thinking about these things in our school districts, then certainly we might want to think about maybe adding that to the discussion plate. So despite all the negatives that can come from it, we need to make the positives so loud that the negatives are almost impossible to hear. That was a great quote from ISTE that sort of rang true over and over about digital citizenship. And the last thing we might look at is this short video that shows how we can do it.
Jeremiah is intelligent, influential, funny, easy to talk to, kind.
Jeremiah is always there for me.
Smart guy, knows where he's going in life.
Great friend.
Jeremiah is an inspiration to us.
Jeremiah is a person who's extremely caring and kind, and he's made a huge difference in our community and our school.
My name is Jeremiah Anthony. I'm a junior in high school. Westside Rose is a Twitter account that I started up in October 2011, and we just send compliments to people who we think are feeling bad a certain day or have done something really good, like winning a state title. And I built this up by first complimenting people I knew, my friends. And then they started telling their friends, and those people started telling their friends, and then soon it became a pretty popular following. I believe that showing the goodness in people is very integral to our account, because so many people on Twitter and Facebook, they get cyberbullied because they're less than perfect. And no one is perfect. So we try to have as sincere compliments as possible. I think everyone likes a sincere compliment. This combats cyberbullying because cyberbullies, they try to focus on what's bad about a person. They try to say, hey, you're really bad at this or that. And I try to say, no, you're actually really good at this. And you're much more good at this than you're bad at that.
Westside Rose is a very influential group.
They don't just go for the popular kids, they go for everyone in our school.
They're doing an absolutely wonderful job.
Westside Rose has had a huge impact on so many kids' lives at our school.
Westside Rose is very inspirational to the student population at Westside.
An example to all students at Westside and beyond that, to just be an encouragement.
I think they take people and they boost their confidence up. They surely have done it to me.
Right. So as you can see from that video there, that's just one way in which one school has allowed social media to be a part of the fabric of the school. And we don't really necessarily have time to go over all the details of this, but this was a digital citizenship continuum that was sort of introduced at ISTE. And it really helps us as districts and as schools to think about how much access we're going to allow, where at the same time considering how much access are we taking away from our students. It's a difficult balance to find. But as you can see, it's a worthwhile discussion to have. So those were two of the themes that I wanted to talk about in regards to ISTE, certainly telling our story, and then closely linked to that, students as digital citizens. Now I'll hand it over to Michael to talk about, oh, actually, one thing I did want to mention before it's to Michael, because I'm kind of running out of time for my slide. Google introduced at ISTE, Be Internet Awesome. So it's a free app you can download on your iPad, and it's also a free curriculum. And it's all about being internet smart. It's typically made for middle school and below, but you might think of ways to use some of these tools for digital citizenship in your school. And certainly if you click on any of these pictures, it takes you right to the site to learn more about it. Now we'll turn it over to Michael about design thinking and makerspaces.
Okay. Hi, again, those of you who maybe I haven't directly met face-to-face today, I'm Michael Roush. I'm the third leg of the stool here right now for the Curriculum and Integration Department. And we got a little bit of an introduction. There was a little smattering of some design thinking and makerspace stuff in 2016 at ISTE when we were in Denver. It was much more developed and much more intentional this year in San Antonio that this came out. I think probably the quickest thing that I can do to help you understand design thinking a little better is to explain a couple things that it is not. One, it is not simply graphic design. Some people see design thinking and they think, okay, it's going to be a Photoshop class or something like that. No, not at all on the graphic side of graphic design side of things. It is also not something just for, once you find out that it goes by other names, this little 5-step process that's up here. Some people have seen that little 5-step process under the term of the engineering process. And then some people hear that and they think, oh, okay, well, that's just for the kids that are in some kind of an engineering program that we have, or some sort of another program that we have. Or maybe we can do a little bit of that with our gifted kids. And they start trying to segment a small section of the population that this might apply to. And the fact is that when we go through this process of design thinking, it is in fact just a process, a framework, a structure. And every kid in our schools can benefit from learning about this process and learning about this way of looking at problems and this way of seeing the world. The 5-step process as it's defined here is to empathize, to define a problem, to ideate, to come up with ideas, to prototype, and to test. And to then use that as a cycle to keep going back through. That is an unusual thing. That goes against some of the culture that we have built in schools where failure is bad because failure is final. It takes developing a culture where you get to try and you get to fail. And you get to try again and you get to do a little bit better. And you get to try again, but you get to do a little bit better. And eventually you get to the point where you've got it. And you did it right, and you don't get just half credit because you didn't do it right the first time. That is that's a big culture shift for some of the way that we have developed school. But it's exactly the way that so many things in our life have been designed. Tyler was talking earlier about how the last 20 years have seen more change than any 20-year period ever. It's because we've had that opportunity to try something and to learn something new. And to try something again and to learn something new. Who does this help? Who does this develop when we go through this process and allow empathy to be the lead-in on it? As you can tell, we've been going through a little process here lately where we've been getting the parking lot out here redone. There have been some great discussions in this office over the last few days about where the lines used to be when we try to come in and park. But it's been really interesting to watch this process go by and how this gets laid. They can put in a ton of blacktop really quickly until they get to one spot. And it's where the curb cut is. They slow down when they get there because they have to do something a little unusual. The rest of it all works great, looks great, works wonderful, except for certain people. Now, there are certain people who can't manage the curb like this, so they've come up with this great little thing called a curb cut. Now, that was originally developed with mostly in mind folks like people who are in wheelchairs. But who are the folks who use those curb cuts the most now? Moms with strollers, people with bicycles, me when I'm pulling my presenter's case that's on wheels, and I'll bring it up the curb cut. They stopped and they took a little more time to put that in. But the benefits of doing it did not just go to one group of folks. It went to a wide range of folks who maybe they didn't even intend it for at the beginning. That's what this design thinking process is about. We see a problem, how might we fix it? We'll try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll shift it. We'll do something a little bit better, we'll do something a little bit different. That whole idea comes into the idea of having a makerspace. Now that term gets bandied around a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't go any further than relabeling your library. And that doesn't really extend the full idea of what the makerspace is supposed to do. The makerspace is really a set of creation tools. It's a time and a space for this kind of thing to happen. It's some freedom to put some of these processes into place. Hey, I think this might work. Let's try it, and let's learn from it and do something a little better. One of the best examples I can give you of these two ideas coming together is this little thing. Anybody know what that little doohickey is? Close. That is called a catalyst, and it is a catalyst for the program called WikiSeat. Every student in a group gets one of these, and they're told that their project is that they are going to have to design a seat for someone else. So in doing so, they have to learn about that person. What do they want? What do they like? What do they need? What would be comfortable? How tall are they? How short are they? And taking just that little piece and then some other common materials, they design a seat for somebody else in the classroom. Now, is this the academic content here? Is that just, okay, there was some standard about building a chair? No, heck no. That wasn't the standard. So we need to cut this down some. All right, we can do that. And designing something that matches the needs of the other person and having time to do that in a real thoughtful way. So design thinking in Makerspaces was a huge theme through some of the workshops and some of the things that we did at ISTE this year. There are some great tools for this. Some that will cost you a little bit, some that can cost you a little bit more. We've got some of these set up back there in the sandbox that you'll get to mess with here in a little bit. Arduinos were big. Those are small programmable computers that you can have. You can set those up to do just about anything you need it to do. Makey is another kind of a version of the Arduino that we've got set up back there. LittleBits and Sphero are just, they're small programmable robots that you don't have to learn a coding language before you can get into them. They use what they call a block. We'll get to see more of those when we get to the sandbox here in a little bit. And now we are going to jump back over to Katie to talk a little more about accessing virtual worlds.
We're going to jump around a little bit on this one. Thank you. I just wanted to introduce this theme because I think it kind of comes back to the whole tying in with equity by bringing in these virtual worlds. Because our students, I mean, when you look at districts, some districts, I mean, most of them have really cut down on field trips lately. But some of the districts that have more money are able to access these things. And then you've got districts that don't have near as much money, and they certainly are not taking any field trips at all. So they're not getting the access to that. But even the districts who are still able to take a field trip, that's usually pretty local, right? I mean, sometimes we get to go to Washington, D.C. or like space camp, if that is still a thing, and things like that. But that's kind of the exception, not the norm. And so with these virtual worlds, this is another thing that over the past few years we've been seeing more and more ramping up. And now we have free apps to access these things. We have little cardboard devices that can give you this 3D perspective on virtual worlds. And so now we don't even need to leave our classroom or our buildings, and we can travel underwater. We can go to the International Space Station. We can go across the world to Iraq or to Egypt or to anywhere. There are hundreds and hundreds of opportunities. So I think that the idea of virtual worlds really brings us back to this idea of equity and giving our kids access to things that technology that we could not do without technology.
If you want to go ahead and take it to the next slide, I wanted to talk about, I attended a couple of sessions for some of these Google tools. So this is Google Arts and Culture, Google Expeditions, and then Google Cardboard down in the bottom right-hand corner there. And one of the things that I was amazed by was one of the sessions started out by saying every lesson can and should start out with some sort of visual. Something to get our kids engaged, because really they're visual creatures. That's what they're used to. That's how they learn. And what better way to do that when actually using some sort of virtual world, a 3D picture, or something that they can engage in and sort of be amazed by. So with Google Arts and Culture, it allows you to go to museums all over the world and travel through almost as you're actually there, to go close up to each individual piece of art or picture and view it as you're standing right next to it. Google Expeditions and Google Cardboard, as you'll see in the sandbox later on, it allows you to have a 3D perspective of all sorts of different places all around the world. The Great Barrier Reef is one that we tested out yesterday, and it's amazing to just be able to turn anywhere with this on your face and be like you're actually underwater in this beautiful scene.
I think I made every person in the office do it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But that's what we're getting at. Why shouldn't learning be fun? Why shouldn't our kids be amazed at the start of a new lesson when we're introducing a new concept or a new topic? Why shouldn't they have the ability to, despite any budget your school may have, to see some of these amazing things in our world and to be captivated by it and then to learn about it? So that's one of the things that I wanted to mention is all of the tools I just featured, they're free, they're easy to use, and even with like Google Expeditions or Google Cardboard, you don't even have to have a little cardboard thing for it to work on a device. So just thinking about how we as teachers and educators can do more to immerse our kids in the world around them so that they want to learn about it, so that's fun.
And we do have the expeditions back there for you guys to kind of see and watch too if you have never seen them yourself.
All right, to go back, it's going to reach back just a little bit into the design thinking bit that I had before, but it matches up with what we were just talking about with this. There were a lot of sessions, there were a lot of tables, there were a lot of posters about different aspects of coding. And we're starting to discover, sort of like with design thinking, that coding has a value beyond simply learning how to code that particular program or to code that particular device to learn that particular language in that particular space. I'm getting a little long in the tooth for this game, I think. When I was in school, my first experience with a computer in school was in 6th grade. It was the Color Computer 3, I believe it was. Any old Coco fans? Yeah, it was okay. I loved that thing. And the language that I learned then has been obsolete for many, 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 many years when I learned how to do some programming and some coding on that. But the processes that I learned still hold true today for anything that I'm working with and that I'm learning with. Coding, when we teach our kids to code, we're not simply teaching them how to make a particular device do one particular task or one particular thing that we want it to do. When we expose kids to coding, we're exposing them to critical thinking. We're exposing them to problem solving because nobody ever gets the program right the first time. We're exposing them to the value of failure and learning from failure. That the very non-helpful error message that you get might actually have something in that tells you what's going on and will help you. It talks about computational thinking, which is heavy in those new standards. Once you take a look through those new standards, computational thinking is a big part of those. It's also very inclusive. It also helps promote equity because there are ways to access this. There are ways to come at this from a lot of different ways with a lot of different devices for a lot of different reasons. And just this whole idea that computer science really is taking on this idea of what's coming in the future. We are helping kids learn for a world that doesn't exist yet. John's talking about trying to figure out what the trends are coming for 3 years, 5 years down the road. As educators, I tend to think we should be doing a little more of that for our students. Which world are we preparing them for? The world that exists now or the world that's going to exist when we turn them out into it? And that whole concept of designing and learning some of these processes, are the coding languages that they would learn now, are they going to still be the ones that are being used in 5 years and 10 years? Probably not. We're probably going to have a lot better stuff then. However, the same processes, the same logical thinking, the same critical thinking, the same ideas of collaboration and being able to work with that, those are the kind of things, those are the kind of skills that are going to transfer and that are going to translate to whatever they want to do in the future. And you'll get to see some samples of some of this coding in action back there on the sandbox table here in a little bit as well. There are on this presentation, if you want to go back and take a look at it later, we've got a couple of videos that are embedded here that do a great job of talking about this from code.org, a wonderful set of curriculum that you can use pieces from or you can use whole chunks from to help expose really not just your students but staff to this concept of coding and how do I infuse this, how do I use it alongside what I'm doing in English or in science or in social studies or in art or in music. And there are ways to incorporate it with all of that. A great video from there. Also, another wonderful piece from Reshma Shahjani, founder and CEO of Girls Who Code, and her keynote on Wednesday that went through a lot of this, and it brings together a lot of those ideas of some of what we've been talking about, along with some of the equity pieces as well. These video clips are in the presentation slides, so make sure you go back and find those later on that you can use. Tools are abundant for this. No longer do you have to sink a ton of money into developing and putting together a platform to learn how to code. And you're going to see some of these back there on the table. The Swift Playgrounds up in the upper left-hand corner, developed by Apple, but again made available, all the way down to Scratch, which is a completely blocks-based environment that you can use with early elementary students to get them learning the processes of coding and what those processes look like. And while I'm on the subject of all of this, Forward Edge does offer a coding boot camp that we've been real happy to start putting together to help you understand how to put this together. How can we make this work? How can we make this happen within our school district for the students that we work with? Not just a small segment, not just for our gifted kids, or not just for some kids that we've identified as being very interested in the technology, but how can we make this work for an entire building or an entire district? We have a boot camp that lets you actually really get into the nuts and bolts of this, not only how you can understand it better, how you can help the rest of your staff understand it better, and how you can really make it part of instruction for your students. William, are you ready, sir? We're going to bring you up here, or you can do this from there, I guess. Really wanted to, but all right. To talk a little bit about the vendor floor, because if you have the vendor floor at ISTE is bigger than some conferences I've been to.
Are you plugging in for this part? Are you plugging in for this part?
Okay. I'm good. I don't need to. Yeah. I'm going to leave this right here then for whoever needs it next.
Hi there. If some of you may or may not know me. My name is William Cerrone. I am the CIO here. So basically what that means is that when it comes to evaluating new solutions and determining what's a good fit, what's not a good fit, I kind of help shape the roadmap. You know, I have a lot of input and a lot of input from other people and things like that, but I help to kind of shape the roadmap. So I go out to this ISTE every year just to kind of see what's new, see what's going on. A lot of things I see out there are stuff I'm pretty familiar with. Sometimes there's new things, stuff like that. So one of the, I would say walking around the vendor floor, a lot of things that we saw this year were interactive projectors, interactive televisions, a lot of the same stuff that we've seen in the past, probably technologies that you're using in your schools. Like the others have said, the Google Cardboards and the other interactive expeditions and things like that, those were very popular on the vendor floor. One of the things that is starting to come up that we saw a little bit of, and I'm starting to get some questions from districts. I know depending on whether, depending on the age of your building, you may have an aging coax infrastructure that was previously how you distributed cable television to your classrooms. And you may or may not be having problems with Time Warner saying now you have to have a little box in every classroom, and that comes at a cost, whereas that was usually free. So one of the things that I was kind of looking around for was to see if there was a good low-cost solution for that. Did see a couple solutions that we're kind of evaluating in the process, but nothing yet that's the smoking gun is what I would say on that. The vendor floor this year, though, was huge. I would say, how many vendors was it on the first slide?
I don't remember. There were hundreds.
Hundreds and hundreds of vendors. So it was
Here's a few pictures.
Yeah, definitely a very active place. It's a very interactive place. I know many of you have never had the opportunity to go to ISTE. You can find nearly anybody and everybody who makes something that has to do with education and technology that kind of touches education. They have a booth out here on the vendor floor. You can interact with them. You can talk to the people. So it's definitely a really cool experience.
And then we just have a couple more things to share with you before we break out into some of that sandbox time. So looking forward, a couple other things. Maybe they weren't big themes and takeaways from the conference, but looking forward. And one of the things that I have seen a lot lately is this idea of redesigning classroom spaces. So my team, we're actually reading a book, Learning Transformed. And this is a big idea in that book, tons and tons of research about education. It's redesigning the physical classroom space and how we learn. And that classrooms need to be more like the Starbucks classroom and less like a cemetery classroom where you just got everything in neat, orderly rows here. And so I thought that was really interesting because we're calling for these huge pedagogical shifts in transforming how and what we're doing in the classroom and how we're teaching, but we're not redesigning the space at all. So we're telling people to essentially kind of take a square peg and fit it into a round hole there, and it's just not fitting. So how can we make this happen? We need to free up the space a little bit and make learning more welcoming in our physical classroom spaces. So that's something to kind of think through as you move forward as well, is, you know, are you talking the talk and walking the walk in every aspect of the teaching and learning environment here? William, back to you. Just when you thought you were done.
So I wanted to touch on one more thing, and Tyler touched on a lot of this, but one of the other focuses, not only for ISTE, but also for Forward Edge in general over the last probably 18 months to 2 years, has been a lot of talk around security. There have been a lot of things that have made the news, whether it's credit card leaks and hacks and things like that at some of the retailers, whether it's malware situations where people's data has been destroyed and things like that. So as a company, one of the things that we've been focusing on, and one of the things that I went down to ISTE to try to gather more information on, hear from other industry experts, other people who are involved in education, what's going on, was about security. So one thing to just kind of think about and take away, I'll kind of explain what the idea is with this slide. And while I don't have any necessarily best practices or anything to take away, I just want to get people thinking about things that we should be considering as we share data, as we interact with different systems, as we bring new applications online, purchase new systems, maintain systems, whatever your role might be. But basically the idea is that we've got a number of different places where data could be stored, where we could be sending data or receiving data. We've got a number of different types of data that might be out there and going around. So we need to make sure that we have policies and procedures in place to ensure that the right kinds of data are being disclosed to the right people. Perfect example is video surveillance footage. You know, sometimes you'll get a case where you've got a video surveillance system and a parent will say, well, I want to see the video. Well, that may or may not be okay. You have to check with your district policy on that, because a lot of times it's against district policy or board policy to show another student's face in a video to another parent. So oftentimes something that seems kind of benign is not okay. You know, other things that maybe should or shouldn't be shared is usernames, passwords, student IDs, things like that kind of seem like benign pieces of data, but you need to be thinking about where those are potentially going and who those are being shared with. Sometimes even something as simple as a home address. You know, if an online service wants kids' home address, you don't necessarily know what they're going to do with the home addresses. One of the districts that came and spoke in one of the breakout sessions that I went to, a teacher had found an application, which is something that we encourage the teachers to do, is find applications, find activities, things like that on the web. Had found an application and had entered in some of the students' info, and then the students were receiving unsolicited mailing at that point. And some of the parents were like, wait, whoa, how did some of this stuff get out? So the district had to kind of create a policy. Now, again, one of the other things that Tyler mentioned, it's finding a balance here. It's making sure that we don't stifle the creativity and prevent people from doing the things that are innovative and that we want them to do in the classroom. Figuring out how to motivate that and build policies around that make a lot of sense. So again, the idea was just to get people thinking about the different places that data could be getting shared, the different types of data that could be getting shared, and make sure that we're kind of thinking about what we're doing there and making sure that we're doing the right thing.
And I'll just add on top of that too, that in the new standards, when they talk about data, that a lot of it has to do with this too. So not just collecting like formative, summative, like assessment data on your students, but this kind of data, account data that's being shared and things like that, and teachers being educated to, again, help them, help you find that balance and what does that look like, so we're not just all the blind leading the blind out there signing up for anything and everything, or just blocking everything because we're afraid and we don't understand it. Okay, and then next year, good news. I know ISTE is always really expensive for people to get flights and hotels and book and everything, but next year, it's always at the end of June. I don't know if we have the actual dates, but it's in Chicago next year at the end of June. So we have the link, conference.iste.org/2018. So if you were hoping to send some people, I think Chicago's definitely, in the past 5-6 years that I've been going, Chicago's been the closest location by far, and the first place that you didn't really need a plane ticket to get to. So if you're thinking about getting it, start working on your administrators now. If you're the administrator, start figuring out how you can send a couple of people to this next year, because it really truly is such an impactful experience. So hopefully, and we'll be going again, so hopefully you'll be able to join us next year. Just a couple of quick things, right? Because we can't invite you here without telling you a little bit more about what we do to address some of these things. So we do offer, we're putting together a few more boot camps. So we have sort of a 4-day comprehensive, you can get graduate credit. It covers all sorts of things for integrating technology into the classroom. We did it at Madeira, so if anyone has questions about that, that was last summer, Dave, in case you need a refresher. But you can ask Dave about it, and we can also hold it on site here too. But that covers a very diverse spectrum of integrating technology into the classroom. And we have two, Michael and I are both certified Google trainers. Tyler's in the process of getting that certification, but we can also hold a 2-day boot camp for you or your teachers if they want to be Google Educator level 1 or 2 certified. So I know a lot of districts are stressing that lately, so we can come out and lead that as well. We also, I thought we had a slide in here, I may have skipped over it. But we do have a piece of paper here. We also do free webinars. So if you're thinking like, okay, this is all great, but let's start with a little something free, this little piece of paper here will kind of give, it's just a tentative schedule. If something like spectacular comes out and we need to replace one of these webinars for a month, then we're going to do that. But this is sort of our tentative schedule. We have one a month starting in August, and we're actually doing a little bonus one in early August about unpacking the new ISTE standards for educators. So we have that. That's all completely free. You can invite all of your teachers to join and tune in to any of these. And then this year, we're also introducing as sort of a bonus for our managed services customers on like the networking side of things. We're going to do an additional once-a-month webinar just for those managed services customers that are, again, free. So those are just some of the things that we are offering that we can help assist you with as well. And so before you leave, I'll just kind of leave this slide up here, but we would love a little evaluation. This is the second time we've done this little ISTE recap. So if you found it beneficial, let us know so we can keep doing it. If you thought it was a waste of time, let us know so we don't waste our time cleaning it next year. And then we also have some information. We'll also get you a contact hour certificate for 2 contact hours. So you can actually, no, I'm sorry, we have the certificates already printed. So make sure to take one of those with you. And then if there's anything that you want more information on, any of the topics we discussed, any of our offerings, you can kind of check that there, and we'll be sure to get you more information about that too. And so now we have this kind of open time. We wanted to save the rest of the time for just kind of allowing you guys to network, chat, and then again, don't forget our little sandbox area over there where we have all kinds of stuff set up that you can check out, get your hands on if you've never seen all those things that we talked about before. Does anyone have anything that they want to ask? Any questions that you guys have about anything before we break away? Questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming, guys. Enjoy, stick around, play in the sandbox. Get a second helping of food and coffee, please. And thank you so much.